Let me tell you about the most prestigious educational institution in the known galaxy, the Intergalactic Academy for Promising Civilizations. You think Hogwarts, but with more tentacles and a significantly lower survival rate for the cafeteria staff. This floating monument to bureaucratic overreach houses the finest young minds from across 17 star systems. We've got crystalline entities that communicate through interpretive light shows, gaseous beings who consider solid matter deeply offensive, and that one species that photosynthesizes exclusively through passive-aggressive comments. The Academy's mission statement, carved in 37 languages across the main entrance, reads, "Nurturing tomorrow's galactic leaders through controlled academic violence." Chancellor Vextar, a blob-like creature with more administrative credentials than actual spine, runs this circus with the iron fist of someone who's never actually seen iron. His species, the molluscoid administrators, evolved specifically to fill out forms in triplicate while avoiding any real responsibility. Perfect for educational leadership. The student body represents the galaxy's most delicate flowers. These kids need climate-controlled environments, specialized diets, and emotional support crystals just to handle basic algebra. The Xeraxian princeling requires a breathing apparatus because oxygen is apparently too spicy for his respiratory system. The Quilarian honor student faints if anyone raises their voice above a whisper. And don't get me started on the Fluffanox twins who need a team of therapists just to cope with the concept of Wednesday. Into this greenhouse of galactic privilege walks Luna Park. Luna appeared on the enrollment roster 3 weeks ago, and nobody quite knew what to make of her species designation. The application listed her as human, which prompted several faculty meetings where professors consulted ancient xenobiology texts and ultimately concluded she must be some sort of previously undiscovered primate variant, possibly related to the gentle tree swingers of Kepler 442 billion. The Academy had never hosted a human before, mainly because humans were considered mythological, like unicorns, but with opposable thumbs and a disturbing tendency toward persistence. The galactic community knew Earth existed somewhere in the unfashionable spiral arm of the Milky Way, but most assumed it was just another garden world populated by harmless herbivores who spent their days composing poetry about feelings. Luna stood 5.5 feet tall, which made her average height for a human but towering by Academy standards. Her brown hair was pulled back in what she called a ponytail, though several Equinian students filed formal complaints about cultural appropriation. She had the unsettling habit of making direct eye contact during conversations, which triggered fight or flight responses in approximately 60% of the student body. This morning's assembly was about to become very educational for everyone involved. Every educational institution, regardless of species or star system, develops its own ecosystem of social hierarchy. At the Academy, this pecking order was maintained through a complex system of intimidation displays, inheritance-based privilege, and the occasional psychic domination. At the apex of this food chain stood Zorik the Destroyer. Zorik belonged to the crystalline hegemony, a species that evolved from sentient gemstones and never let anyone forget it. Standing 12 feet tall when fully extended, his body was composed of interlocking crystal formations that could shift from transparent to opaque, depending on his mood. And when angry, which was his default state, Zorik glowed with an internal light that had been known to cause retinal damage in smaller species. The crystalline hegemony had built their entire civilization around the concept of hardness equals superiority. Their homeworld was basically one giant mineral deposit where the sharpest, most durable crystals rose to positions of power, while the softer minerals were relegated to decorative purposes. Zorik's family traced their lineage back to industrial-grade diamonds, which made him galactic royalty by crystalline standards. Zorik maintained his position through a combination of physical intimidation and psychological warfare that would have impressed ancient human military strategists. His favorite techniques included the resonance shriek, where he vibrated his crystal matrix at frequencies that induced nausea in organic life forms, and the refraction display, where he bent light around himself to appear even larger and more menacing. His inner circle consisted of various species who had learned that survival meant staying in Zorik's good graces. There was Quiblex, a gelatinous entity who served as Zorik's personal echo chamber, agreeing with everything the crystal said while secretly plotting his eventual overthrow. Spike Runner-Cree filled the role of muscle, despite being roughly the size and consistency of an angry houseplant. And then there was Whisper Scream, whose species communicated entirely through ultrasonic frequencies that caused migraines in anyone unfortunate enough to be nearby. The social hierarchy below Zorik's elite tier was maintained through a complex system of ritualized submission. The floral students would present offerings of rare minerals during the morning dew ceremony. The aquatic division performed synchronized swimming routines in the academy's ornamental pools. Even the faculty participated, with Professor Gel Lax delivering his xenobiology lectures while maintaining a respectful 15-degree bow toward the crystalline section of the classroom. Luna had been observing this social structure for exactly 72 hours, and her assessment was both thorough and deeply concerning for anyone who understood human nature. She took notes in a small notebook, cataloging threat levels, behavioral patterns, and what she clinically referred to as tactical weaknesses. Her human brain, evolved from millions of years of predator-prey relationships, was processing the Academy's social dynamics with the same analytical precision her ancestors had used to hunt mammoth herds across Ice Age tundra. When other students attempted to warn Luna about Zorik through a combination of panicked whispers and interpretive dance, she simply nodded and wrote down additional observations. The Fluffernox twins tried to explain the danger through a series of increasingly frantic squeaks, but Luna just smiled politely and thanked them for the intelligence briefing. Zorik had noticed the new student, of course. His crystalline senses were finely tuned to detect potential challenges to his authority, and something about Luna's calm observation set off every alarm in his mineral consciousness. She didn't display the proper submission protocols. She didn't participate in the morning fear rituals. Most disturbing of all, she looked directly at him during assemblies without the appropriate cowering. By lunch period on her third day, Zorik had decided to make an example of the weird new kid who clearly didn't understand how things worked around here. The Academy cafeteria was an architectural marvel designed to accommodate the dietary needs of 17 different species simultaneously. The photosynthetic section basked under full-spectrum grow lights while absorbing nutrients through their root systems. The carnivore corner featured a carefully curated selection of what the menu euphemistically called protein sources, though most humans would have classified them as violations of several Geneva Conventions. The mineral bar offered an impressive array of rare earth elements arranged by atomic weight and aesthetic appeal. Luna sat alone at table 847B in the omnivore section, methodically consuming what appeared to be 2 slices of bread with some sort of brown paste between them. This sandwich had caused quite a stir among the faculty when Luna's dietary requirements were submitted. The ingredients included processed nuts, which were considered barely edible by most civilized species, combined with what the humans called jelly, but which bore an unfortunate resemblance to certain biological secretions. The other students had learned to give Luna's lunch a wide berth after the incident with the apple, where she had bitten directly through the fruit's protective skin with her exposed calcium phosphate dental structures. Several crystalline students had required counseling. Zorik's entrance into the cafeteria was, as always, a carefully choreographed display of dominance. His crystal matrix shifted to a deep red coloration, while internal harmonics created a low-frequency rumble that made the cafeteria's structural supports vibrate sympathetically. He moved with the deliberate pace of a glacier, allowing his presence to be felt throughout the room before making his announcement. Great attention. Lesser beings. Zorik's voice resonated through multiple frequency bands simultaneously, but causing the aquatic students to dive under their tables and the floral section to reflexively close their photosynthetic apertures. It has come to my crystalline attention that we have a new student who lacks proper understanding of our social protocols. The cafeteria fell silent, except for the gentle humming of the grow lights and the nervous chittering of various small creatures. Zorik's posse arranged themselves in a classic intimidation formation, with Quiblex oozing into position on his left while Spike Runner-Cree bristled menacingly to his right. Whisper Scream hovered overhead, emitting ultrasonic frequencies that made everyone's teeth ache. Zorik extended one crystal appendage toward Luna, who continued eating her sandwich with what appeared to be complete indifference to the gathering storm. Strange creature. You will demonstrate proper submission protocols immediately. Luna looked up from her lunch, chewed thoughtfully for another moment, then swallowed before responding. Sorry, what now? The casual tone of her response sent shockwaves through the assembled student body. Several of the more delicate species began hyperventilating into emergency oxygen supplies. Professor Tentaclius, who was monitoring lunch period from the faculty observation deck, began updating his resume. Zorik's crystal matrix shifted to a deeper red, approaching what mineralogists would classify as murderous crimson. You dare address me with such casual disrespect? I am Zorik the Destroyer, heir to the Diamond Throne of Kepler 2847, future overlord of 17 star systems. That's nice, Luna said, taking another bite of her sandwich. Good for you. If the cafeteria had been quiet before, it now achieved the kind of silence typically associated with the vacuum of space. Even the grow lights seemed to dim in anticipation of the coming carnage. Zorik's resonance shriek reached frequencies that shattered 3 decorative mineral displays and caused the emergency sprinkler system to activate in the floral section. His crystal formations extended to their maximum height, making him appear even more imposing as he loomed over Luna's table. I will demonstrate why lesser species bow before crystalline superiority, Zorik announced, beginning the traditional hegemony intimidation sequence. This involved color changes, harmonic resonance, and the deployment of razor-sharp crystal projections that could theoretically slice through most known materials. Luna finished her sandwich, carefully wiped her hands on a napkin, and stood up. The 11-second countdown had begun. Second one. Luna's brown eyes focused on Zorik with the kind of attention that apex predators reserve for particularly interesting prey. Her human brain, running on millions of years of evolutionary programming, began processing threat assessment data at a rate that would have impressed military targeting computers. Zorik's confident crystal matrix flickered as some deeply buried survival instinct from his species' pre-sentient past started screaming warnings. Second two. Luna's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, the weight moving to the balls of her feet in a stance that looked casual but was actually the foundation for explosive movement. Her breathing remained steady, controlled, which was somehow more terrifying than any dramatic battle cry would have been. Zorik's internal harmonics wavered as his mineral consciousness registered something fundamentally wrong with this creature's lack of fear response. Second three. N. The smile that crossed Luna's face was the kind that human mothers throughout history had learned to recognize as a sign their child was about to do something that would require extensive property damage insurance claims. It was friendly, patient, and absolutely devoid of anything resembling submission. Zorik's crystalline matrix began shifting toward yellow, which in his species indicated the onset of existential panic. Second four. Luna moved, not with the flashy acrobatics that most Academy species used in combat, but with the efficient, economical motion of a persistence hunter closing on exhausted prey. But she covered the distance between herself and Zorik faster than his crystalline nervous system could process the information. A human reflex is operating on a timescale that made her appear to teleport from the crystal's perspective. Second five. While Zorik's consciousness was still trying to compute how Luna had crossed 8 feet of space in what seemed like zero time, her human hands made contact with his primary crystal appendages. The crystalline hegemony prided themselves on the unbreakable nature of their physical forms, which had been tested against industrial cutting tools, plasma weaponry, and the gravitational forces of small moons. Second six. Luna's grip strength, evolved from millions of years of hanging onto tree branches while being chased by various large predators, began demonstrating why humans had conquered their home planet despite being smaller and slower than most of their natural enemies. The diamond-hard crystal that formed Zorik's manipulator arms began developing stress fractures under pressure that shouldn't have been possible from such a small creature. Second seven. Zorik's resonance shriek cut off abruptly as Luna's other hand reached up and gently, almost tenderly, touched the central crystal formation that housed his primary consciousness. Her touch was feather-light, barely making contact, but somehow conveyed the unmistakable message that she could have crushed his entire crystalline matrix without breaking a sweat. Second eight. Countdown. The psychological warfare that Zorik had spent years perfecting turned against him as his own species' survival instincts began cataloging all the ways this deceptively small creature could end his existence. His crystal matrix started shifting through the entire visible spectrum as various fear responses triggered simultaneously. Second 9. Luna leaned closer to Zorik's primary auditory receptor and whispered something that nobody else in the cafeteria could hear. Whatever she said caused every crystal formation in Zorik's body to go completely transparent, which in crystalline physiology indicated either complete terror or total system shutdown. Second 10. Zorik's 12-foot frame began collapsing as his structural integrity failed under the weight of genuine fear. His posse of sycophantic followers scattered in various directions, with Quibblex literally dissolving into a puddle and Spike Runner Creedy attempting to camouflage himself as decorative vegetation. Second 11. Luna released her grip and stepped back, brushing imaginary dust off her hands with the casual air of someone who had just completed a mildly interesting but routine task. Zorik's crystal matrix had achieved perfect transparency, making him effectively invisible, except for occasional light refractions that revealed his presence cowering behind an overturned lunch table. What Luna had whispered in Zorik's auditory receptor was actually quite simple. My species invented the concept of siege warfare, and we're very, very patient. The aftermath was immediate and comprehensive. Zorik's crystalline form began making a sound that could only be described as whimpering, though it was unclear how a mineral-based life form could produce such pathetic noises. His legendary intimidation displays were replaced by what appeared to be attempts at making himself as small and unnoticeable as possible. Within minutes, Zorik had completely vanished from the cafeteria, leaving behind only a few scattered crystal fragments and the lingering scent of ozone that indicated someone had achieved faster than light travel without proper authorization from the Academy's transportation department. Luna sat back down and began unpacking what appeared to be her second sandwich, apparently considering the matter closed. The Academy's communication networks lit up like a supernova as news of Zorik's defeat spread through 17 different species gossip channels faster than information could travel through official administrative channels. The crystalline hegemony's embassy received an emergency transmission requesting immediate evacuation of their heir apparent, citing irreconcilable philosophical differences with Academy curriculum. Within 6 hours, Zorik had been transferred to what the official paperwork described as advanced meditation therapy on a distant moon that specialized in helping crystalline entities cope with existential trauma. Unofficial sources suggested he was spending his days hiding in a cave while receiving intensive counseling about the nature of apex predators and why size wasn't always an accurate indicator of threat level. Chancellor Vextar's administrative response was a masterpiece of bureaucratic panic. His molluscoid form produced enough stress-induced slime to lubricate the Academy's entire ventilation system as he frantically reviewed Luna's enrollment documentation for the first time since her arrival. The species designation human had been filed under the category harmless herbivore variants, but a quick consultation with the Academy's xenobiology database revealed some disturbing discrepancies. Humans, according to the updated files, originated from what galactic classification systems designated as a Class 12 death world. This was the kind of planet where evolution had apparently gotten drunk and decided to create creatures that could survive in environments that would sterilize most known life forms. The atmospheric composition alone would be toxic to 60% of Academy species, and the native life forms seemed to have evolved specifically to make existence as challenging as possible. The student body's reaction was a complex mixture of terror, confusion, and awkward attempts at diplomatic immunity. The Fluffanox twins began leaving small offerings of rare minerals outside Luna's dormitory room, which she politely accepted while having no idea why her neighbors were providing her with what appeared to be very expensive rocks. The aquatic division started performing elaborate submission displays whenever she walked past their residential pools, causing Luna to wonder if all the swimming was some sort of exercise routine she should be participating in. Various species attempted to demonstrate their non-threatening nature through traditional cultural methods that Luna found bewildering but endearing. The photosynthetic students would burst into flower whenever she approached, filling the corridors with clouds of pollen that made her sneeze. The gaseous entities tried to communicate their peaceful intentions by changing colors rapidly, which looked like Christmas decorations having seizures. The faculty's response was more subtle but equally panicked. Professor Gel Lax began restructuring his xenobiology curriculum to include a new section titled Deathworld Survival Strategies and Why They Don't Apply Here. Professor Tentaclius started carrying what appeared to be emergency sedatives designed for crystalline life forms, just in case any other students decided to challenge the new apex predator. Luna's daily routine remained completely unchanged. She attended classes, took notes, participated in group projects, and continued eating her terrifying Deathworld rations with apparent enjoyment. Her homework was submitted on time, her dorm room was kept clean, and she even joined the Academy's Xenobiology Club because she found other species genuinely fascinating. This normal behavior was interpreted by the rest of the Academy as sophisticated psychological warfare. When Luna smiled politely at other students, they assumed she was cataloging their weaknesses for future exploitation. Her habit of helping classmates with difficult assignments was seen as a complex dominance display designed to demonstrate intellectual superiority. Even her tendency to hold doors open for other students was analyzed as a subtle reminder that she controlled access to important resources. The irony was lost on everyone except Luna herself, who had come to the Academy specifically because she wanted to study xenobiology and learn about other species. Her childhood dreams of making friends with aliens and exploring the wonderful diversity of galactic civilization were being systematically destroyed by everyone's terror of her species' evolutionary advantages. The breaking point came during a routine chemistry lab when Luna casually mentioned that humans used hydrochloric acid for digestion. This revelation caused the evacuation of 3 academic buildings and prompted emergency meetings among faculty who were beginning to understand exactly what kind of creature they had accidentally admitted to their institution. 6 weeks later, Luna had settled into what she optimistically called her new normal, though it bore little resemblance to the Academy experience she had imagined when filling out her application from Earth. Her morning routine began with the reverence gathering, where approximately half the student body would arrange themselves in the main corridor to perform various species-specific submission displays as she walked to her first class. The crystalline students would dim their internal lights respectfully. The floral section would close their photosynthetic apertures in what they believed was a show of non-threatening behavior. The aquatic division had constructed a small fountain where they performed synchronized swimming routines that were apparently meant to demonstrate their harmless nature. Luna had tried explaining that these displays weren't necessary, but her protests were interpreted as sophisticated psychological manipulation designed to test their dedication to proper submission protocols. The Academy's xenopsychologist, Dr. Bubblethink, had written a paper titled Apex Predator Behavioral Modification Techniques that was being distributed throughout academic circles as a case study in interspecies dominance, but theory. Her academic performance remained excellent, though her professors had developed some interesting teaching adaptations. Professor Gel Lax now delivered his xenobiology lectures while maintaining what he believed was a safe distance of 15 feet, communicating primarily through written notes passed by volunteer students who drew straws for the honor. Professor Tentaclius had installed a reinforced barrier around his desk and conducted all interactions through what appeared to be a military-grade communication system. The most significant adaptation had occurred in the cafeteria, where Luna's eating habits continued to cause widespread psychological trauma. The Academy had constructed a separate dining area, euphemistically called the Special Dietary Section, where Luna could consume her terrifying Deathworld rations without causing mass panic among the student body. Her lunch companions consisted entirely of the Academy's maintenance staff, who were apparently too focused on their work to be properly terrified. The maintenance crew, it turned out, was sentient fungi from the Decomposer homeworld, and they found Luna's efficiency and straightforward communication style refreshing after years of dealing with the Academy's more dramatic species. Chief Maintenance Officer Spore Breath had even taught Luna some basic fungal cultivation techniques, which she found genuinely interesting despite having no idea that her new friends were considered the galactic equivalent of janitors. Luna's social life had taken an unexpected turn when she discovered that the Academy's cleaning staff were actually remarkably intelligent beings who had chosen maintenance work because it allowed them to observe other species without the social complications that came with formal academic status. They appreciated Luna's habit of treating them like actual people rather than invisible service providers, and their conversations during lunch had become the highlight of her day. The psychological impact of Luna's presence had created some interesting secondary effects throughout the academy. Academic performance had improved dramatically as students threw themselves into their studies with the desperate energy of creatures trying to prove their intellectual worth to an apex predator. Disciplinary incidents had dropped to zero, as nobody wanted to draw attention to themselves through disruptive behavior. Even the faculty had become more efficient, cutting unnecessary bureaucracy in favor of streamlined processes that wouldn't waste the time of someone who might eat them, if sufficiently annoyed. Dr. Bubblethink's research had attracted attention from xenopsychologists throughout the galaxy, who were fascinated by what they termed the Luna effect. Academic papers were being written about the psychological transformation that occurred when lesser species were exposed to a genuine apex predator in controlled educational environments. The Academy was being studied as a potential model for educational reform throughout 17 star systems. Luna remained blissfully unaware of most of this academic attention, focusing instead on her original goal of understanding other species and maybe making some friends along the way. Her journal entries, which she assumed nobody would ever read, contained detailed observations about the fascinating behavioral patterns of her classmates, extensive notes on comparative xenobiology, and increasingly frustrated comments about why everyone seemed so nervous all the time. The cycle was about to begin again. A new transfer student had arrived that morning, Crusher of Worlds Mech Thor, a member of the aggressive warrior caste from the battle planet Skullhammer VI. Mech Thor stood 8 feet tall, was covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating, and had apparently been sent to the academy by parents who thought their offspring needed to learn proper respect for academic authority. Mech Thor had spent exactly 30 minutes at the academy before deciding that the pathetic creatures surrounding him needed to learn about proper hierarchy. His species believed that dominance was established through ritualized combat, and he was looking forward to demonstrating his superiority over these obviously weak academic types. Luna noticed the new student during her third period xenobiology class, where Mech Thor was loudly explaining to anyone within earshot that his homeworld's educational system was based on survival of the fittest, and that he intended to bring some proper military discipline to this collection of weaklings. She sighed quietly, made a note in her journal about aggressive behavior patterns in warrior caste species, and began mentally preparing for another 11-second educational experience. After all, some lessons needed to be taught more than once. The galaxy's most dangerous species, it turned out, were dangerous precisely because they didn't realize they were dangerous. They were just trying to make friends, study interesting subjects, and maybe learn something about the wonderful diversity of life among the stars. The fact that they were accidentally terrifying was just another day at what Luna had started thinking of as Deathworlder High.